Whoa, in the time it took for me to turn this camera on, the light changed from like cool blue to orange. What the heck, Seattle? Hello everybody, it's Anna and welcome back to my booktube channel. This video is going to be my Geekly Wrap-Up for the week of, what month is it? December 9th through December 15th. I didn't play any games this week, but I managed to read 3, 4, 5, 6... I read 6 books? Wow, awesome! Considering that I spent most of this week like on vacation, dealing with a lost dog, and on airplanes trying and failing to sleep because jet lag is a bitch, I'm kind of stunned that I managed to read 6 books. A lot of these were on Kindle, so you won't see me holding up as many as I usually do, but let's go ahead and get started. So the first book that I read is called Mary Toft or the Rabbit Queen, a novel by Dexter Palmer. When Sean and I were in Philadelphia, we went to this place that was called like Third House or Third Brain or something Brain Books. I don't remember. I will link them down below though in the description because it was a delightful little bookstore in Philly. And I picked this book up because it's about one of my favorite like medical mysteries and famous hoaxes. It took place in the 18th century and it was of this woman that claimed that she was giving birth to rabbits. Obviously she wasn't because people can't do that. And I will say that this does include some like content warnings for some descriptions of like things being done to animals. Nothing that's too incredibly graphic on the page, but as you can imagine, she's not giving birth to live rabbits. You can pretty much fill in the blanks of what was going on and how she was claiming that she was giving birth to rabbits. I won't go into details, but that is discussed in the book because it is a lot about the scientists and courtiers and all interested parties that tried to explain why a woman could be giving birth to rabbits. The way that this book was written was really interesting, and I definitely understand why a lot of people have like drawn parallels between it and our modern times and issues like the veracity of claims made on social media and the sort of like hive mind or mob mentality that happens in certain corners of the internet. Twitter. Anyways, so I can definitely see like the parallels between this and a lot of the conversations that are at the front of our discourse about semantics and figuring out what is truth and, you know, our epistemology, how we know what we know, how we understand truth and how we relate to it and use it to make sense of inexplicable information. There is a lot more that I want to go in depth talking about this book. I think I'm actually probably going to reread it and do a more in-depth review, but after a first glance, it was truly excellent. Gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I really love the fact that the author said that he wrote this. Also, this is a book that's written by a Black man, so add that to your list if you are looking to read more books by Black authors. That made me definitely much more interested in picking it up since I am realizing just how few Black authors I read. Yeah, not enough. So, he said that he first heard about Mary Toft in a graduate school seminar and that story just stuck with him, and that was in 1996, and if that isn't like the greatest endorsement for playing the long game on your creative projects, I don't know what is. Anyway, that was really heartening to me. Okay, next I read a novella that was on my Kindle called The City Born Great by N.K. Jemisin. So this kind of reminded me of one of the short stories in How Long Till Black Future Month. I don't know if that's because it was the exact same short story or if she expanded upon this short story in that collection, but it was really good. It was about somebody that is like going around, I believe it's meant to be New York City, and like they're responsible for the survival of the city, and they're kind of acting as this like midwife for the city to be born into the world because there's this like lore that when cities become a certain size, they need somebody to help make sure that they survive and they don't like implode on themselves. So it was really good. It was really poetically written. Like everything she writes is very poetic, but this was definitely a bit more like free form than her typical prose, and I really liked it. Then I read, and honestly didn't care for too much, another booktube favorite. This was a romance. Like you know, I'm trying to read more romance in this year to come. So I read Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey, which is a story about this girl that like falls in love with a guy and she flips houses, but weirdly, like, he's trying to flip houses too to impress her, even though he's kind of a jerk, and she is balancing that with her job as a clown at kids' birthday parties. I don't know. I really honestly did not care for the relationship dynamic between these two. And if I'm not invested in the way that the couple like communicates and is with each other emotionally, it doesn't matter how good the smutty scenes are. I don't care. Like, I can't be bothered to invest myself in that when it's purely physical when I'm reading a book, because that's just not my taste. I'm realizing that, like, there's way more to the romance genre than just that, so I'm, like, glad to know that it's not me. It's just that the book isn't a good fit for me. But I honestly didn't really care for it, and I think I'm gonna forget about it pretty quickly. I gave it 3 out of 3 stars, because again, there was nothing in it that was bad per se, it was just not good. Okay, then I read another memoir, Daring to Drive, A Saudi Woman's Awakening by Manal al-Sharif. This is a memoir by the woman who was jailed for many days because she dared to drive a car in Saudi Arabia, where it is, women are strongly, strongly discouraged, like, by being thrown in jail and deprived of, you know, food, water, access to the outside world from driving cars. It's actually not a law on the books, but it is a custom, which is very important in Saudi society, but that is what inspired al-Sharif to actually get her driver's license and drive a car in defiance of saying that this is the way that we must do things because it's the way we've always done them. And she started a movement that has gained a lot of international notice and accolades and things like that, and I really enjoyed this book. Again, it does come with a lot of triggering content in it, such as, you know, child abuse, child neglect, descriptions of beatings and torture and things like that, including also description of female genital mutilation. So be warned of that going in if these are things that you're sensitive to, because this is a big part of her life and things that happen to her, and as such, descriptions continue throughout the book. Especially as an adult, she tries to deal with some of the lingering trauma from things that happened to her when she was growing up. That was really good. I gave it 4 out of 5. Then I listened to an audiobook. Yeah, that's not something that you usually hear that I do, mostly because I find that I get really distracted when I'm listening to them because I want to get up and go do other things, and then suddenly I'm not paying attention to the book. But I've learned that actually audiobooks are great for when you are in transit, either like driving a car or riding on a plane, because you can't really get up and do anything else except pay attention to the book, keep your eyes on the road, keep yourself awake, etc. So I listened to It's Not What It Looks Like, which is by Molly Burke. Molly is a blind YouTuber that I have been watching for, I don't even know, 4 or 5 years now? I don't even remember when she started her channel. I think she'd only been doing it about a year when I started watching her. But anyway, she has since, you know, gone viral, blown up, exploded, moved to LA, and is probably like one of the more visible disabled people on YouTube, especially outside of those that talk about disability on YouTube. So I really enjoyed watching her videos, and this was pretty good. I mean, I feel like it's more of the same that you get from her videos, because it's very much like sitting down with her and listening to her tell you stories about her life, and I knew a lot of them already just because I have been watching her videos for so long. So I gave it 3 out of 5 because it was fun, but I feel like it's more like if you are a super fan or if you don't really know anything about her, maybe the audiobook would inspire you to go watch her videos, because it is an Audible original. So I don't know if most of the people listening to it are Molly's like followers on YouTube, or if they're just random people that go, oh look, an Audible original, I wonder what this person's deal is. But I really enjoyed it. Obviously, you know, we need more stories about disabled people by disabled people, and I would recommend listening to this if you can, because it's a great story in that sense. Okay, and then I read a nonfiction book, almost entirely on a plane. I don't know why I tend to do this, but I tend to end up reading books or watching movies that are about like terrible disasters and tragedies on planes. And this is really bad. As someone with anxiety, it's really bad for me to be like, let's read a book about, in this instance, one of the deadliest fires in American history on a plane where you can't escape and no one can hear you scream. I did this to myself. Anyway, the book was called Tinderbox, The Untold Story of the Upstairs Lounge Fire and the Rise of Gay Liberation by Robert W. Fieseler, I believe is how it is pronounced. And I again picked up this book because I had heard about it, similar to my Rabbit Queen book I talked about. I had heard about it on a Stuff You Missed in History class episode because the upstairs lounge fire was, until the Pulse shooting in Orlando, it was the deadliest massacre of queer people in the United States because there were 33 people that died as a result of the fire, and countless more were left with, life-threatening and very serious injuries and burns and stuff like that. It was an intentional fire that was set as sort of an act of self-hating loathing from somebody who was queer, and set a fire that killed a lot of people and was very bad. And this is kind of the story that puts the fire not just in the context of like the typical true crime narrative that you would read, where you're establishing a timeline and reading about how law enforcement was, able to track down the person that actually committed the crime. But this situates the crime, the arson, as part of a broader social movement, and also within the biographies of the people whose lives were very affected by it. Not just the people that died, but the people that survived either their injuries or narrowly escaped being in the building while the fire was happening. And then it also situates it within the larger social movement for gay liberation, gay rights, etc. Puts it in conversation with things like the AIDS crisis and its relationship to the Stonewall riots, which were maybe like only 4 years before this fire actually happened. So like very, very early on in what we consider the dawn of queer history in America. Even though, of course, queer history has always been there, it just hasn't been as visible and obvious as something like this fire or the Stonewall riots. Reading this after visiting the Stonewall Inn in New York City gave me a lot of feelings. I don't really feel like I can talk about that right now on this video because I have really strong emotions still surrounding that and surrounding the Pulse nightclub shooting, which was not that far away from where I was living at the time and where I had many friends that were regulars at that club. So I feel like I don't have the distance that I would like to discuss how that makes me feel publicly. But this is a very important book. You should read it if you are interested in queer history. You should read it if you are interested in learning about the ways in which media representation really matters. Because a big part of this book is talking about how difficult it was for the media, like to get the media to acknowledge that this was a crime that was targeting queer people. A lot of times, like even by the standards of the time, the language was not used to indicate, hey, this was a gay bar. Homosexual people are the ones that were targeted by this crime. And it was just such this like uphill battle to just even get the media to use the word gay or use the word homosexual, because that was, the predominant word that they would have used at the time. So I really enjoyed that book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. If you're looking for queer nonfiction, American history, true crime even, I would definitely recommend that. So those are all of the books that I read. Keep your eyes peeled for my 8 Nights of Hanukkah romance vlogs, because that's going to be a lot of fun, I think, to make and share with you all. If you like this video and you'd like to see more of what I do, please do consider hitting that subscribe button, because that's the best way to get notified when I post new videos. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!